in American history and the world who's ever indicted a president, the man you might recall who brought 2 criminal indictments against then-defendant Trump. I am talking about someone we almost never hear from before, during, and after those cases, former DOJ special counsel Jack Smith, the only federal prosecutor to indict a president. I don't care who he happened to be talking to, it was going to be a big deal because it was his first comments. Since all of this happened and the person he once prosecuted as a federal defendant, Donald Trump, has become president again. Smith, who speaks in a very businesslike and dry way, you can prepare for that because I'm going to show you this. He is not jumping around and being dramatic. He's not speaking in sound bites, to be sure. And yet, in a way, he was still quite candid.
Like, can you believe this? This isn't some anonymous source whispering to reporters. This is federal court testimony. This is documentation. This is someone saying, I was there, I saw it happen, and here's the paper trail to prove it. And what they're describing is wild. We're talking about direct orders to falsify business records, direct orders to cover things up, direct orders that cross every legal line you can think of. And then, because apparently that wasn't enough drama for 1 week, a federal judge just came out and said the Trump administration violated a court order. Not like, oh, you made a little procedural mistake. No, the judge called it a ham-handed attempt to bully the states. Those are the actual words used in the ruling: ham-handed, unlawful, bullying. So yeah, we've got a lot to unpack here. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest, you can't really trust headlines anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video. But here's what makes this whole thing even crazier. The Department of Justice, they've opened a new investigation, not into the original stuff. No, this is about witness intimidation, because apparently, while all this court stuff is happening, Trump's been going on social media, making what the DOJ is calling aggressive posts aimed at witnesses. Like, come on, you're already dealing with testimony about illegal activity, and your response is to allegedly threaten the people testifying? Are you kidding me? Look, I know some of you are thinking, oh, here we go again, another Trump controversy, another investigation. We've seen this movie before. And yeah, fair, we have seen a lot of legal drama over the past few years, but this one hits different because we're not talking about interpretations of campaign finance law or debates about executive privilege. We're talking about someone in federal court saying this person told me to break the law, and here's proof. That's not a political spin. That's not an interpretation. That's testimony under oath with documentation backing it up. And the timing, oh man, the timing makes this even messier because all of this is happening while Trump's in his second term, right? He's a sitting president dealing with federal investigations, court rulings calling his actions unlawful, and the DOJ opening new probes into potential witness intimidation. The constitutional crisis vibes are off the charts. Here's the thing that keeps bugging me though. The witness, the one who came forward, they didn't just say Trump made bad decisions. They said he knew exactly what he was doing. There's this paraphrase quote from the court statements that basically says, we're not talking about someone who thought they were operating within the law. We're talking about someone who knew the line and decided to cross it anyway. Knew the line, crossed it anyway. That's intentional. That's not ignorance. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. And look, whether you love Trump or hate Trump, whether you think this is all a political witch hunt or you think he belongs in jail, that distinction matters. Because if someone in power knows something is illegal and does it anyway, and then tells other people to help cover it up, that's not just breaking the law, that's abusing power. That's corruption in its most basic form. So what we're going to do in this video is break down exactly what happened, what this witness said, what the evidence shows, what the judge ruled, what the DOJ is investigating now, and why all of this matters way more than just another headline in an already chaotic news cycle. Because here's what nobody's really talking about yet. This could change everything. Not just for Trump, not just for this administration, but for how we understand presidential power and accountability. The Supreme Court's already getting ready to rule on cases about Trump's attempts to expand executive authority. State governments are pushing back against federal overreach. And now we've got a federal witness saying the president personally ordered illegal acts. This is wild. So stick around because we're about to go deep into the most explosive political story of the week. And trust me, it gets even crazier than you think. All right, so let's get into what actually happened here. Because the headlines are flying around, everyone's got hot takes. But like, what does the testimony actually say? What's in these documents? And why is a federal judge using words like ham-handed and unlawful in an official ruling? Let's start with the witness testimony because that's the bombshell that started all of this. This week in federal court, a key witness came forward with documentation, not rumors, not hearsay, actual documents reportedly showing Trump directly directing illegal financial transactions. We're talking about falsifying business records. We're talking about orchestrating cover-ups. And according to the court filings from October 13th, this witness has paper trails, emails, messages, financial records showing Trump personally instructing staff to do this stuff. Now here's where it gets interesting, because this witness isn't just saying, oh, I think Trump knew about this. They're saying Trump told me to do this. He gave direct orders, and here's the documentation proving he was directly involved. That's a completely different level of evidence, right? Like, you can argue about whether someone created a bad work environment or whether they should have known what their staff was doing. But when you've got someone saying, I received direct orders from this person to commit illegal acts, and here's the proof, that's not ambiguous. That's not open to interpretation. That's just bad. And then, because one bombshell apparently wasn't enough for this week, the Department of Justice opened a new investigation into witness intimidation. According to reports from October 13th, the DOJ is pointing to aggressive social media posts from Trump as evidence of intent to threaten or intimidate key witnesses. Can you believe this? So you've got testimony dropping about illegal orders, and while that's happening, the DOJ is investigating whether Trump's trying to intimidate the people testifying. It's like, if you're already in a hole, maybe stop digging. But apparently that's not the strategy here. Now let's talk about the federal judge ruling, because this is where things get really spicy. Judge William Smith issued a ruling on Tuesday, that's October 14th, saying the Trump administration violated a previous court order. In the language he used, not gentle, he called their actions a ham-handed attempt to bully the states and ruled that what they did was unlawful in relation to FEMA grant conditions. Ham-handed, bullying, unlawful. Those aren't words judges just throw around casually. That's a federal judge saying, you were told not to do this thing, you did it anyway, and your attempt was so clumsy and obvious that I'm calling you out publicly in my ruling. And here's what makes this even more significant. This isn't happening in a vacuum. The Trump administration has been fighting with states over federal power, over grant conditions, over who gets to make decisions about everything from disaster relief to education funding. And now a federal judge is saying they violated a court order while trying to force states to comply with their demands. That's abuse of power on top of illegal activity. So let's pause for a second and connect the dots here, because there's a bigger picture that people are missing. You've got witness testimony about direct orders to commit illegal acts. You've got a DOJ investigation into witness intimidation. You've got a federal judge ruling that the administration violated court orders. And all of this is happening while Trump's in his second term as president, meaning he's wielding the full power of the executive branch while facing these allegations. Like, the constitutional implications here are massive. Because here's the question everyone should be asking. What happens when the person accused of ordering illegal activity is also the person controlling the Department of Justice? What happens when the president is accused of witness intimidation while having the power to fire anyone investigating him? What happens when federal judges are ruling against the administration, but the administration can just ignore them? These aren't theoretical questions anymore. This is happening right now. And let's talk about that quote from the witness statements, because it really drives home what we're dealing with here. The paraphrase version says, we're not talking about someone who thought they were operating within the law. We're talking about someone who knew the line and decided to cross it anyway. Knew the line, crossed it anyway. That's premeditated. That's not an accident. That's not a misunderstanding of the rules. That's looking at the law, knowing exactly what it says, and deciding your power means you don't have to follow it. And here's why that matters so much. Because intent is everything in criminal law. If you can prove someone knew something was illegal and did it anyway, that's way worse than if they made a mistake or acted out of ignorance. That's the difference between a mistake and a crime. So when a witness comes forward and says, this person knew exactly what they were doing was illegal and ordered me to do it anyway, that's damning. That's the kind of testimony that can lead to criminal charges. Now I know some of you are thinking, but presidents have immunity, right? Can they even charge a sitting president? And yeah, that's complicated. The Supreme Court is actually about to rule on cases related to Trump's presidential powers and the limits of executive authority. There's this whole fight happening right now about whether Trump can expand presidential control in ways that defy state and judicial orders. So we're in this weird constitutional gray area where the president is facing allegations of criminal activity, but also has powers that might shield him from prosecution, while courts are trying to figure out exactly what those powers are and aren't. It's a mess. But here's what's not complicated: the evidence. Because regardless of what happens legally, regardless of whether charges can be filed or whether presidential immunity protects him, the testimony and documentation are out there now. A witness came forward. Documents were submitted to federal court. A judge ruled the administration's actions were unlawful. That stuff doesn't just go away. And then there's the political fallout to consider. Because we're not in a vacuum here. Public opinion matters. Voter sentiment matters. And when you've got testimony about illegal orders dropping in federal court, when you've got judges calling your administration's actions unlawful, when the DOJ is investigating you for witness intimidation, that affects how people see you. The polling data and public reaction to all this is still coming in, But come on, this isn't good. Even Trump's strongest supporters have to admit this week has been rough in terms of optics. So here's where we are. A federal witness has provided testimony and documentation alleging Trump personally ordered illegal activity. The DOJ has opened an investigation into possible witness intimidation. A federal judge ruled the administration violated a court order and called their actions an attempt to bully states. And all of this is happening while Trump's sitting in the Oval Office with all the powers of the presidency at his disposal. It's wild, it's unprecedented, and honestly, it's terrifying from a constitutional perspective, regardless of which side you're on politically. Because if this testimony is accurate, if the documentation holds up, if the allegations are proven, we're talking about a sitting president who knowingly orders staff to break the law and then potentially try to intimidate the witnesses who could testify about it. That's not politics, that's crime. Okay, so let's break this down into simple points because there's a lot of moving pieces here and I want to make sure we're all on the same page about what's actually happening. Point 1, the witness testimony is really specific. This isn't vague allegations. This isn't sources say or people familiar with the matter. This is a witness in federal court providing documentation that reportedly shows Trump directly ordering illegal financial transactions and personally telling staff to falsify records and cover up evidence. Like, that's specific. That's detailed. And according to the court filings from October 13th, there's a paper trail backing all of this up. What does that mean practically? It means the prosecution or investigators have actual evidence they can point to. They've got someone willing to testify under oath. They've got documents that can be verified. This isn't circumstantial. This is direct evidence of alleged criminal activity. And here's the kicker. The witness statements emphasize that Trump knew what he was doing was illegal. He understood the law, saw the line, and chose to cross it anyway. That's intent. That's the piece prosecutors need to build a criminal case. So yeah, point 1 is that the evidence here is way more solid than a lot of previous investigations. This isn't smoke. This might actually be fire. Point 2, the DOJ investigating witness intimidation changes everything. So you've already got this explosive testimony dropping in federal court, right? And then the Department of Justice opens a new investigation into whether Trump's been intimidating witnesses. According to the reports from October 13th, the DOJ is looking at aggressive social media posts Trump made, arguing they constitute threats or intimidation aimed at key witnesses. They're saying the posts show intent to influence or scare people who might testify against him. Now, here's why this is such a big deal. Witness intimidation is a separate crime. Even if somehow the original allegations don't stick, even if there's some technicality or immunity issue, witness intimidation is its own thing, and it's serious. Like, you can't just threaten people who are testifying in court. That's obstruction of justice. That's a felony. And if the DOJ can prove Trump's social media posts were intended to intimidate witnesses, that's a whole new criminal exposure. Plus, and this is important, witness intimidation charges don't care about your job title. Presidential immunity might protect you from some things, but actively trying to interfere with a court proceeding, that's way harder to claim immunity for. So point 2 is that even if Trump somehow avoids charges on the underlying illegal activity allegations, the witness intimidation investigation creates a separate path for potential criminal prosecution. Point 3, the federal judge ruling shows a pattern. Okay, so we've talked about the witness testimony in the DOJ investigation, but then you've also got Judge William Smith's ruling from October 14th, calling out the Trump administration for violating a court order. The judge said they made a ham-handed attempt to bully the states and ruled their actions were unlawful regarding FEMA grant conditions. Now, why does this matter? Because it shows a pattern. It's not just one isolated incident. It's not just one rogue staffer making bad decisions. You've got testimony about ordering illegal activity. You've got alleged witness intimidation. And you've got a federal judge saying the administration violated court orders while trying to force states to comply with their demands. That's a pattern of behavior. That's using power to break rules, intimidate opposition, and ignore legal boundaries. And patterns matter in legal cases because prosecutors and judges look at whether someone's actions were a one-time mistake or part of an ongoing approach to how they operate. And when you can show pattern, when you can show someone repeatedly chooses to break laws and violate orders, that's way more damning than a single incident. So point 3 is that the federal judge ruling isn't just important on its own. It's important because it fits into a bigger pattern of alleged abuse of power and disregard for legal constraints. Point 4, the constitutional crisis is real. Here's the thing nobody's really talking about enough. We're in uncharted territory here from a constitutional perspective. You've got a sitting president facing testimony about ordering illegal acts. You've got the DOJ, which works under the executive branch that the president controls, investigating the president for witness intimidation. You've got federal judges ruling against the administration. And you've got the Supreme Court about to decide cases about the limits of presidential power. Like, can you see the problem here? The person accused of crimes controls the people who would investigate those crimes. The person accused of violating court orders has the power to ignore those courts, and the ultimate authority on presidential powers hasn't yet decided what those powers actually are. It's a constitutional crisis in slow motion. And here's what makes it even more complicated. Trump's in his second term. He's not running for re-election because he can't. So the normal political pressure of voters will decide doesn't apply the same way. And the question of whether you can prosecute a sitting president, that's still not fully settled law. So we're watching a situation unfold where serious allegations are being made, evidence is being presented, investigations are opening, but it's not clear what accountability can actually look like while Trump's still in office. That's scary, honestly. Regardless of your politics, the idea that someone could be accused of ordering crimes and intimidating witnesses while holding the highest office in the country, and we're not sure what can be done about it, that should concern everyone. So what happens next? All right, so where does all this go from here? The witness testimony and documentation are now part of the court record. That's not going away. The DOJ investigation into witness intimidation is active and ongoing. Federal judges are ruling against the administration's actions, and the Supreme Court is going to weigh in on presidential power limits soon. In the short term, expect more legal filings, more testimony, probably more investigations. The evidence that's come out this week is going to spark additional scrutiny of Trump's actions, both past and present. Politically, this is a nightmare for Trump's public image. Even his supporters have to contend with federal testimony alleging he personally ordered illegal activity. That's not spin, that's court documents. And legally, well, that's the big unknown. Can a sitting president be charged with crimes? Can presidential immunity protect him from these specific allegations? What happens if the DOJ investigation concludes there was witness intimidation? Those questions don't have clear answers yet. But here's what we do know. This story isn't over, not even close. The testimony that dropped this week is just the beginning. There's going to be more revelations, more legal battles, more investigations. And at the center of it all is this fundamental question. What happens when the most powerful person in the country is accused of knowingly breaking the law and then using that power to cover it up? We're about to find out. The bottom line. Look, here's what you need to take away from all this. A federal witness came forward with specific testimony and documentation alleging Trump personally ordered illegal activity. The DOJ opened an investigation into possible witness intimidation. A federal judge ruled the administration's actions were unlawful, and all of this is happening while Trump sits in the Oval Office with full presidential powers. This isn't partisan noise, this is federal court testimony. This is DOJ investigations. This is judges issuing rulings. Whether you love Trump or hate him, whether you think this is all politically motivated or completely justified, the evidence and allegations are serious, they're specific, and they're not going away. So keep watching this story, because it's going to define the next chapter of American politics and constitutional law. And trust me, it's only going to get more intense from here.